Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States, looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we add 2 billion new people to the globe by 2050, how are we going to be able to take care of and create all this new technology and products that are going to actually improve the quality of life and the lifestyle of not only the 2 billion joining us, but the 7+ billion that are already here. We have a gentleman who's been working on this topic for a number of years and also is very much involved in protecting the intellectual property, the processes, and the actual technologies themselves that are coming out of all the innovation and collaboration that's going to be needed to meet the new demands as we move towards the 21st century. This is Geoffrey Mason. He goes with Esquire. He is an attorney, founder and CEO of what's called FastPatentPartner. And we're going to be talking about crowdfunding for green causes. And Jeff, welcome again to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you, Sam.
It's always good to have you. Thank you for being here. Tell us about this FastPatentPartner. What is it? And then we'll get into crowdfunding.
Yeah, FastPatentPartner is a deep data mining company. We mine the internet, we mine government databases for information that really isn't anywhere else and use it to help people win cases.
So looking at that, and now we're going to morph into this crowdfunding because this is the thing that many green causes, but also companies that are making new technologies, products, and especially processes as we're trying to address climate change and environmental quality. How does this big data really relate to that? And then how does that really get into crowdfunding?
Well, crowdfunding is extremely popular, particularly because that actually was part of the Jobs Act. The laws have now been changed so that securities offerings can be made more broadly than ever before, which is kind of exciting. And it's a very new area of the law, so a lot of people are trying to get into it and not get into a lot of trouble doing it. But there's some very interesting technologies out there. They basically plug into social media. You get people interested in things, and they have places to go to contribute to causes that matter to them a lot. And that's really a very exciting phenomenon. There's a lot of money moving through the system now, and it's just going to get better and better.
Yeah, and this whole thing, of course, it goes back to one of the political parties that utilizes social media at a great extent, and they found out this is a way to involve more and more people and allow them to actually give smaller amount of money, but at the same time feel like that they're really plugged in, they're on the leading edge of maybe a new wave of process or technology or social thought. And so how does crowdfunding fit that model of moving forward, going to the edge of the horizon, but allowing people to feel like they're truly engaged and not falling over the abyss?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the technology companies have really blazed the path, but as you're right, political companies or political parties are picking up on it as well, and so are people that are more traditionally soliciting from wealthy individuals. And I think you're right, it's that engagement that's so key. If you're designing a good crowdfunding campaign, maybe for $25 you get a t-shirt. Okay, well that's what WETA has been doing for a long time. But on the other hand, what's really engaging people? It's exclusive content. Maybe if they give a certain amount of money, they'll have exclusive meetings with certain kinds of people that they would really like to meet with because they really want to talk and share their views about whatever the causes happen to be. And as entrepreneurs become more and more celebrities, it sort of begins to cross over because you really want to meet this certain entrepreneur. Maybe that's how you do it. Same thing goes with any kind of a social cause. I mean, if you're a real celebrity, if you're Dr. Hancock and we want to meet you, and you've got some kind of a crowdfunding thing, and you put in a segment that says, for a couple $1,000s, I'll fly you to Washington, D.C., and you can come to our headquarters and meet with us and talk about what you think is really important and what people want to see out of this campaign. I think those are all interesting things that every time somebody creates a successful basically social movement as well as also a crowdfunding campaign, we all learn how to do it better.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the crowdfunding, and of course now it's being known more and more as cause funding. So what's been the bridge going from the crowd, hey, we're looking at, let's get everybody, on the universe, involved in what we're doing, and then to kind of parse through all that, identify those that are like-minded and have the same spirit as we have. How do we get through all of that using your concept of big data?
Well, I mean, there are big platforms there. So Indiegogo and Kickstarter, and there's actually one that's specifically designed for social causes. So there are these platforms, pre-existing platforms that you can use. And of course, there's a massive amount of information now inside those platforms. They are basically economies. And so as they learn more and more how these things succeed, those data sets themselves become incredibly important assets, which in turn they can sell. So yeah, there is a lot of science to this ultimately, because you're watching behaviors on a massive scale. I mean, Facebook itself, I think Facebook, they add staggering amounts of information to the network every day, and the statistics are all on Wikipedia. I'm not even going to go into it, but talk about big data. Yes, this is huge data.
Yeah, and it's out there. Now, looking at, we're going from cause into, let's say there's a real technology company, they're a startup, or they've been around for a while, but yet they want to add to their existing line of technologies. Is this crowdfunding apply to them as well?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got lots of early stage hardware technology companies. They're not necessarily always green, but they certainly can be. And that's also something that I think is becoming a much more accepted way to begin to get early stage financing, because particularly in the technology community, but certainly within even the green community, people get excited about new technologies. And when you're excited about it and you want to show it, but you don't want to spend a lot of money on it, $25, $50, $100, and you get enough people doing that, and enough people are liking you on Facebook, following you on Twitter, because they're really speaking to some issues that people are thinking are very important. I mean, there are very accepted ways of doing this, and yes, it's very powerful, and it doesn't really have to be just a small early stage company. It can be larger companies too. I mean, some of the best social media campaigns that are out there are run by like Pepsi and some other very well-known companies that are out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So looking at the, let's say that somebody wants to start this, they've never done it before. So what's kind of the steps that they need to go through to think about to make sure that they're really heading in the right direction and going in an area that's really going to have the greatest impact on them, but also the people they want to involve and bring along with them?
If they're doing it for the first time, then they're going to want to deal with somebody who actually has done it before. So that you want that experienced person. Possibly you'll find that person through your network. You may also have to hire them. I mean, we've looked at these kinds of issues sometimes, and we've actually had decided that yes, we don't really have in our network currently these kind of people, because we've been looking at crowdfunding for a couple of different reasons. And yeah, there are every PR firm, every digital agency that's out there is getting a lot of experience with this kind of stuff. Some of them are poaching people from places like USA Today, which had big campaigns. So you really have to just look at the skill set and the resume there. And once you've got somebody like that on board, either because they're part of the founding group or because you're just hiring them as a consultant, then yeah, you've got somebody that really can help you design your campaign, and then look at lessons learned.
Looking at the involving with the website, many people they have a website because everybody else has a website. Some people use them really well. Others, they're just kind of a storage box, for photos and what they've been doing over the past, but not really engaging people. So should people think about using their existing website? Should they go out and create something on their own, or is it a blend of the two of those?
You'd really have to see what kind of terms you're going to get. I mean, Kickstarter and Indiegogo, they're businesses, they're there to make a profit. So they're certainly taking a certain percentage, and the overhead is what it is. If it's a big enough campaign, you might look at what would a developer cost. What would a developer cost that can build up a website that's really tailored to your interests and doesn't cost nearly as much. You'd also have to integrate e-commerce aspects and do it securely. Otherwise, you have a bunch of credit cards that get lost. That's not going to be very good for you or your campaign or your donors. So there are security aspects to it, but certainly they're not insurmountably difficult, particularly for smaller campaigns. And so it's worth weighing that against the major platforms we've all heard of.
How do you make sure that when people give their credit card information that it truly is secure? I mean, we're hearing all these incidents, large multinational retailers losing 40 million,
right.
credit cards, with all the information on the individuals. These small startups, they're small. They don't have a lot of money in most cases. So how do they make sure that they're absolutely secure and they don't follow the path of some of these large retailers that, are, infamous for losing information?
Yeah, there's two basic approaches. One is to use an open source solution. So there are famous, like Drupal is an open source system where people have built lots of different kinds of websites and secure e-commerce websites where they're available for licensing for reasonable amounts of money. Or you can integrate a custom solution, but that is more expensive. But there are also companies that they essentially specialize in making sure the credit cards stay safe. And so they're not on your servers anymore. You can't even get to them yourself if you wanted to. So those are the kind of companies you need to be looking to solve those problems. You shouldn't be trying to keep that stuff stuff secure yourself. It's very expensive.
Well, going back to the website, what kind of things do people really need to be aware of? What should they be incorporating? What should they not be doing? Many people just put absolutely everything on there. Right. Should it be more targeted? How do you think it should be, Jeff?
Well, it's almost a question of first branding, messaging, what's your mission statement, what's your logo, that kind of thing. And so you really, if you're, again, the first time doing this kind of thing, it would be good to sit down with somebody who's done a lot of that kind of work to really craft the message. And then yes, the website sort of should come from it. There shouldn't be too much on it. You're right. It should be clean. It should be compelling. It should tell a story. It should engage people. And just how you do that, it really depends a lot on what you're trying to engage them in. If it's a device, if it's a green technology device, make them love the device. Make them really want to see it come to life. And sometimes that means concept art. Sometimes that means videos that you prepared. And you can do a lot of things. And it can get expensive. But on the other hand, to make something real for your end user, that's always the most important thing, whether it be a social cause or actually making sure that this technology really does get out into the world. And I think that's where, yeah, the website can do a good job at that, but it does take a lot of work and a lot of thought.
Now, looking at the website, many people think, build it, they will come kind of concept. But the idea, I think, is it's a lot of shoe leather involved in this, and personal contacts, and going to professional associations that's related to the area you're interested in. So what's that balance? And then how should people go about, having these personal contacts and really building their own base, not just trying to rely on the website to do all that for them?
Oh, you certainly need to complement, I would say, digital strategy with just old school networking and old school, salesmanship. Because at the end of the day, you're right; those are not obsolete concepts. How you're doing both and how you're successful at both can also depend a lot on your personality. But I have seen a lot of people that do combine both very effectively, and I think that one thing you could be doing is you're constantly putting out interesting content. I mean, forget about what you're ultimately building. For example, Mint.com was built with about $50,000, and it was started as basically a blog where people got really engaged about financial issues and how they couldn't figure out how to use the existing software platforms because they were really hard. So people, even before they actually built the infrastructure, they had a community that they really built, an online community. And you could do the same thing through social media. So once you have a community that's engaged in your topic, then you can then say, okay, now we've actually got something real to go do with this. And then, yeah, at that point, in fact, it can be a very powerful tool.
Now, looking at in today of the internet and all the social media and all that, how would you define a community, and how should people look at expanding their sphere of influence so they actually have a community? And this needs to be quick. We're almost out of time.
Sure. That's not an easy question, but LinkedIn is obviously an amazing resource. Lots of groups, lots of different focus groups within it. Certainly, if some of those begin to look appealing, you certainly should start there. And there are probably all kinds to begin with. And then, of course, you can build your own website, your own blog, your own content. And if you get enough followers, eventually, it really does become independent and a very powerful tool.
No, that's fantastic. Geoffrey Mason, goes by Jeff, attorney, founder and CEO of FastPatentPartner, talking about crowdfunding and cause funding for green issues. And thank you for being with us as we're looking around the globe to find those best practices in 144 countries as together we create the Emerald Planet.
Osama bin Laden calls getting nuclear weapons a religious duty.
Today, materials that can be used to make nuclear weapons are stored in more than 40 countries.
Sometimes protected by just a chain-link fence.
Yet not enough is being done to lock down these materials
before terrorists steal them.
Why did we learn all this?
My mother,
my son,
my sister-in-law
were all murdered September 11th.
Help protect America.
Together we can.
Please join us.
The stem cell issue is being debated throughout the country. Truth is, most everyone has an opinion, even if they don't know the facts.
Let's stop arguing and start really understanding the potential of stem cell research.
For us and for millions of Americans living with disabilities, get the facts.
Call 1-877-842-3442 for free information from the Stem Cell Research Foundation. That's 1-877-842-3442.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
One nation under God.
Indivisible.
With liberty
and justice
for all.
In America, there's either room for everyone, or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
Planning a home renovation? Put this at the top of your to-do list. Because after 10 years, none of you are protected against tetanus and another potentially fatal disease, diphtheria. A minor injury, such as a cut or a scrape, can put you at risk for a tetanus infection. And while safety gear offers some protection, an up-to-date vaccination called the TD Booster is the best insurance against tetanus. So get the TD Booster. If it's been 10, do it again.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States, and we're looking around the globe for what we call the best of the best as far as the technologies, the services, and the products, and of course the people that are making a difference as we have a planet with 9 billion souls by 2050. And we need to have a planet that's actually going to take care of them, who provide the food, the fuel, the fiber, and the basic infrastructure, plus the health care and education. And so how do we do that? How do we create the jobs, but at the same time, how do we create the new intellectual property and the trademarks, the copyrights, all these things that just adds value to a company or even a nonprofit organization? We have someone sitting right beside me who's been on the Emerald Planet before. This is Antigone G. Peyton. She is an attorney, founder and CEO of what's called Cloudigy Law. And even though I've heard this times before, I still love this name. It's fantastic. And we're going to be talking about this intersection of cybersecurity and green intellectual property issues. And Antigone, welcome back.
Good to be here. Thank you, Sam.
Always glad to have you. Tell us about Cloudigy Law. You're growing, expanding. Why?
We are. Cloudigy Law is what I'd call a non-conventional law firm. We focus on intellectual property and technology law, which is really an expanding area and really a global practice. We focus on excellent, great communication with our clients and innovation in our practice of law. So those are the types of clients we work with, clients who want that in their lawyers. And we all tend to be scientists and technologists who have come to law. So we understand the business side, we understand how to build technology. My background is chemistry, and we all come in with these different skill sets to really focus on our client's business, and from the business needs, work back to solve the IP issues, to really think about the IP strategy in light of what their business needs are.
Yeah, and there's certain logic that goes into the IT world, or as far as the hard sciences are concerned, that's really unique, and I think it's really applicable to this green law area, which is really probably the fastest growing area as far as law, not only in the United States, but all over the globe. But looking at when you're advising your clients, it's replete in the media about the number of cyber attacks. You hear, 50 million a day and these kinds of things. What's really going on out there, and why are, governments as well as for-profit and even non-profit so interested in what's going on in other countries and this intellectual property, which is really, it's almost like it's galloping as it's being created at such a rapid rate?
That's right. I mean, there's a couple of big issues going on. One is IP can give you a competitive edge. So if you've developed great technologies, other people want it. So whether you've hired a manufacturer who's giving that information to another company, or you've got a former employee who's walking out the door with information you don't want them to walk out the door with, you've got a problem. You've got a leak of really important company information, and you've got to deal with it. We've also had some very high-profile cases involving loss of consumer data. That's really hurt the brand of a number of companies. Whether we think about Target or the Neiman Marcus Group, these types of situations where millions of people, information has been compromised, or sensitive data, sensitive financial data has been compromised, people are really sensitized to this, and they know that it's a brand issue for them if the public or their consumers hear about the same issue at their company. Mm-hmm. So people are really sensitive about it, and they're putting a lot of money behind it to figure out how to solve this problem and make sure it doesn't happen to their company.
Now, the United States were somewhat unique as far as its legal framework and its attitude and how it addresses IP, whatever that may be, and then of course processes and the technologies and all that. But Europe has a very heightened sense of sensitivity to all this because what happened in World War II leading up to that. How do you balance when we're in a global economy, people are competing in 214 countries and territories, and they may even they're still living in small town USA, but they're already out there because of the internet. How do we have to look at things much differently and a much more global perspective than ever before?
We have to understand who's accessing our information and what the risks are associated with that access. So if we have a manufacturer in China or in India, for instance, we need to understand the local laws. And I'm not just talking about the laws protecting IP, I'm talking about the enforcement procedures. From a practical point of view, we have to be ready for the fact that once we put our information in other people's hands or put it on an insecure network, we run the risk that others will be able to access that information and do with it what they will in another location where we really have no ability to stop their behavior, which might otherwise cause a problem if it happened in the United States.
Looking at not only the technology companies, but also the nonprofits, the cause-related, as I guess they're known now, organizations, what do they need to be really aware of? Not just the technology services and products we think of traditionally being out there, but just the ideas, the processes in order to go about, providing humanitarian aid or delivering supplies, the supply chain link. All this has real value, and it has value back to the organization and can either help or hinder their fundraising. There's all kinds of financial implications in every one of these things.
Yeah, I'll talk about it generally as their competitive edge, right? And it can be patents, trademarks, trade secrets, copyrights. It can be their people, their resources, their training for the people who come in and help them do their business. So they really need to start by identifying where that value is and who might want to take it, and then think about where the risk areas are, whether it's certain very sensitive information should not be on a network that's connected to the internet, or if they have multiple steps in a very sensitive manufacturing process. Do they have the ability to separate those steps so that no one global partner in the manufacturing process has access to all the information they need in order to create a competitive product that might otherwise violate their IP rights? So there's a number of creative ways that you can deal with the issue. It goes back to understanding the company and where the value lies, and then crafting the protection regimes around that value, knowing what this particular business is focused on, and frankly where the insecurity lies.
Yeah, looking at that, and that really covers the technology side of all that, but the cause-related organizations, those that don't really have a technology as such, but it may be a process like the American or International Red Cross as an example, or Salvation Army, which you think of purely as American, but it's global in everything that it's doing. At the same time, they're depending on the supporters they have, the fundraising prowess in order to be able to continue to enhance their operations. But if somehow, another organization, another country decides to confiscate or use that same, they may lose access to their competitive edge. And I'm not sure that green organizations, the nonprofits, really think about that. And the fact is they're competing, for dollars to be donated to their cause, whatever that cause is.
For causes like that, the brand and the trademark is actually a very important asset that they need to protect, to make sure that companies that they're partnering with are taking care of the brand, that are consistent with the mission, and they're not taking the funds that are provided to them and using them in ways that are unauthorized. So they actually do a great amount of policing of their trademarks to ensure that they're protecting that brand. So when you or I or others think about their cause, they're not thinking about somebody who scammed them for money and then said they were with the Red Cross but in fact weren't. So for companies like that, trademarks are very important, brand protection's very important, and they have to deal with scams.
Yeah. How do they get at that? That's very expensive. You're talking about many cases, legal action, and it may be 3 countries removed that's going through that. And of course, again, you have hackers replete in a number of countries in Africa and the old Eastern Eastern Bloc and even in Latin America. So how do companies that, or organizations that really do have, you know, a recognized brand, it may be over 100 years or more old, all of a sudden they're competing with people that have just created themselves maybe in the last 24, 48 hours on the internet. So how do they go about policing that and realizing who's real and who's not out there and who they really should be talking to?
Well, they need to protect their customers and their customer information.
So it really goes back to the people that you're serving as how you have to, okay, all right, go ahead.
Right, I mean, that's certainly one area,
okay.
right? So for entities like that rely on donations from around the world, if somebody were to get into their network and get access to all those email addresses, I mean, that's almost devastating, right? And you also need to make your consumers aware if there is a breach, if there is access to that information, so that if they get an email that's not an authorized email going to another site, they know to be aware of that. So that's a situation in which if there is a breach, instant feedback to your consumers and creating knowledge and educating them about what's a real communication from your nonprofit or your cause-driven company versus what a non-authorized communication looks like. It's important to do that quickly, and it's important to make sure your consumers understand when something is related to your brand and when it's not.
Looking at it, of course, you're an attorney, a professional in this whole area. Should organizations have an attorney or somebody that's maybe not on retainer, but someone that's really familiar with their organization that's there in order to be able to help out in these kinds of things? Or it happens and then you go try to find someone that's going to be able to help and assist at that time?
So usually what happens is prophylaxis is less expensive than dealing with a problem after the fact. So if you set up your systems and procedures in a manner that's considerate and thoughtful, and you're doing everything you can reasonably to protect your information and your customers and things of that nature, you stand a better chance of avoiding those kinds of breaches, which can be very costly on the back end from a goodwill point of view, as well as just frankly from an expense point of view as well as you deal with it.
Look, go ahead.
So, well, I was going to say it's a good idea to have somebody who is an advisor early on and really knows your business to help you issue spots so you can figure out where your generally limited resources should go when it comes to whether it's protecting IP, whether it's building the backbone of your infrastructure to protect your information, because that's really the golden egg of the company. You need somebody who's thinking strategically about this from the beginning.
Time goes too fast. We're almost out. 30 seconds. Where's Cloudigy Law going to be over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Well, we're certainly growing, and we're dealing with clients not only in the U.S. and abroad, so we're going to continue to use cloud technologies and a number of other interesting systems to really increase our practice and continue to be transparent with our clients.
It's fantastic, and it's always good to have you on Emerald Planet with us. This is Antigone G. Peyton. She's an attorney, founder, CEO of Cloudigy Law, and an expert as far as how to protect your intellectual property, and also really an expert in how to create intellectual property. So thank you for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
This is firstgov.gov, where we're obsessed with getting you government information.
Brand new student loan applications on the site, baby. This calls for a celebration. Here's your uncle.
So in the end, it was either take the astronaut gig or come work here. What can I say? Duty called.
Dude, that's my cop.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure that's Sam's cop.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No. Sam's? No.
Just log on or email us and get what you need.
C, change of address form. That's how it's done. D, driver's license renewal.
E, emailing Social Security information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice, we'll allow it. All right, Ed. What are those?
Government surplus cars for auction.
You posted those online last time.
No, you did.
I'm posting them online this time!
For all your government information, firstgov.gov.
Oh, what have we got here? Sometimes you feel tired. You can't seem to lose those extra pounds off your midsection. And your joints hurt when you take the stairs? Well, you're getting older. But I'm happy to say that there's some simple things we can do to keep you happy and healthy for years to come. We can also lower your risk for some serious diseases the older population is often subject to. Proper nutrition is more important than ever. Your body has changed, you know. Not as many treats. A basic exercise plan, lots of walks and fresh air, and most importantly, come and see me for twice-yearly checkups to help ensure the best possible quality of life. Now, how does that sound? Good boy.
Improve the quality of life for your elderly pet. Schedule twice-yearly checkups that include preventive care and regular lab work. A message from the veterinary members of the American Animal Hospital Association.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you looking in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, and also the people that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. Because as we create new businesses and new green causes, organizations, unless we have the right leadership and people that are really looking around the globe to be inclusive, as we have a planet with 9 billion souls, it's going to be very difficult to meet all of those needs when we're struggling at 7 billion on the planet. But at the same time, the 2 billion additional ones are going to be here, and we need to take care of it. And it's by creating new intellectual property, new technologies and products and services that are going to help in that. I have two people sitting with me that are very much involved in all of this. Over to my extreme left is Geoffrey Mason, who is an attorney, founder, CEO of what's called FastPatentPartner. And right beside me is Antigone G. Peyton. She's also an attorney, founder and CEO of Cloudigy Law. And we're going to be talking about the first steps for early stage green technology and also green causes. And Jeff and Antigone, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. In the order, Jeff, I'll start with you, and then Antigone, tell us a little bit about your organizations, and then how does that really relate to this early stage in, we'll just say, the green space?
Well, FastPatentPartner does deep mining of internet and government data to help mainly patent attorneys, but at the same time, there's a whole bunch of people who are doing deep mining for lots of different reasons, so we've gotten to know a lot of those folks, and some of them are doing it for different kinds of causes, so we've gotten to sort of see some of the kinds of lessons learned from our own early stages to looking at people that are just trying to get off the ground with, some type of green technology or a particular social cause they think is very important.
Okay, Antigone?
So we were certainly a startup at one point. Now we've reached a stage where we're more established. So we certainly understand what startups are dealing with when they're trying to develop technology and launch and get revenue in the door. When we deal with startups now, and particularly in the green space or when it comes to causes, we're primarily looking at how we protect their assets given where they expect to be now as well as in 5 years, right? So it's the long-term approach to IP protection. And once we understand what their goals are and where they want to be and where they might be manufacturing certain parts of their technology, then we back up to say, okay, given what they want to do, what makes sense from an IP perspective. And it's frankly uniquely crafted for the company and the problems they want to solve, their technology, and where they want to be.
Mm-hmm. You know, Jeff, this is something that you and I have talked about extensively, but there are many technology companies that really are almost operating like cause or issue-driven organizations, and then you have issue-driven organizations almost act like technology because they're constantly looking for new technology they can bring in and put it out. And so both are trying to save the planet, they're trying to address climate change, but let's say they're not getting the attention they need, they're not really focused on their brand, and so it gets diffused as far as what they are and where they're going. And as Antigone was saying, we need to be looking 5-10 years out. They're looking at 5 to 10 days, to do something. What do they need to be thinking about, and how do they formulate this, but at the same time protect who and what they are?
Yes, well, I think you're right. If you get too confused, you go after too many things at once, people don't know what you stand for. They don't have any reason to think that you're going to succeed at 5,000 different things. But if you start making your brand very focused, working with groups like Antigone's group, and also thinking about how to protect that brand over a longer period of time, your messaging gets better and your copy gets better, and ultimately you start to stand for something that people really appreciate, and that helps people engage. And I think that if you're doing that online, digitally, if you're legitimately reaching out to people in large forums where you're giving speeches about issues, I think that can really get a very large followership. And I think it is always important, because you're right, digital or analog doesn't really matter. If it's a confused message, it's still confused.
Looking at the work that you do, and I'm going to go back to you, Jeff, for just a minute, and let's follow this. Looking at how to stay focused, how do you get people to do that? Because people are excited about so many different things, and they go off to a meeting and they get excited about the 15th thing of the day or the 15th thing of the month. So how do you coach them, through your legal work, stay focused on whatever that is, that X, Y, and Z? How do you do that?
It's sort of interesting, because this goes back to my background mainly as an attorney, because as a litigator, this is the same kind of problem you have. You have 15 attorneys, okay, and they're all working on the same case. And yes, we would get in the room together, and when we came out of that room, we had a policy and a direction, okay, but before we went in there were 15 different opinions typically. So you really do need to get people to be honest with each other, to engage each other, to sit down and have those kinds of conversations. And I see that work very well in the PR world, the lobbying world as well. So I think that those same lessons, that kind of give and take where you come away and respect ultimately the group's decision on something, that's how you get things coherent. If you never had that discussion, then you're going to go in 15 different directions and it's not going to be successful.
Many people really, they start their business or they start their organization, Antigone, and then they kind of evolve the idea, and then they're looking at really, what are we? How are we operating? How should we be operating? They've never really had that discussion. Maybe they don't have someone like Cloudigy Law to lead them through that. How do they determine the entity that they really need to structure themselves around, so that as they have a good idea, they have the right outreach, but yet they need to have a platform that's actually going to support them as they're moving forward? How do you make that decision?
I think one of the first things that companies need to do is sit down in a room and say, okay, what's our values? And values are different than the mission, right? The mission's sort of easy sometimes to come up with. We want to mine big data for law firms, right? But how do we get there, right? Who are we, and who are the clients we want to work with? How do they self-select so the right people come in the door that we want to work with? And that's a really complicated question, and it's an evolving answer. But I think if you sit down and you start talking about who we are as an organization and what our values are, that starts to encapsulate things better. And then we can really start talking about branding around that, because there are people who scientifically look at colors and shapes and how the brand relates to value.
Almost
right?
The feng shui of philosophy.
Exactly. So I think that's an important first step. And along with that, you mentioned the business entity and the corporate entity, and there are lots of different options, but once you understand what the company focuses and its values, then you can understand whether it should be a nonprofit and it meets the nonprofit requirements, whether it should be an S-corp, which has a number of other unusual requirements, or something more traditional like an LLC. And then of course there are many states that have their own flavors and hybrids. So, where's the company doing business? Where do they expect to be doing business 5 or 10 years from now? And where are the principal people located who are going to be really running the business? So all of this is something you should keep in mind.
Yeah, looking at this, and let's go back, let's follow this just a little more, Antigone, if you don't mind, about this entity that we're creating. And do they have to decide up front, we're really going to be a global company, or we're really going to be a US or Mexico or Japan-based organization? Or does it really matter in today's world, where you start, where you think you're going to end up? We're all going to be international no matter what.
Well, it does matter, particularly from an IP perspective. So for instance, if you want to use your company name in Japan or other countries, unlike the US, there are a number of countries that are not use-based companies when it comes to trademarks. It's the first to file for registration in that country actually wins the trademark. So if you're going to be in a country that is a first to file country, you need to be thinking about this ahead of time. Now, of course, companies change their focus. We thought we were going to manufacture in this country, now we want to manufacture in this country. But to the extent that you can have those what-if conversations ahead of time and think about the contingencies, you can better plan for those.
Jeff, Antigone brought it up, but you and I have been talking about this whole notion of branding. And we just kind of throw that term around, branding this, branding that. I'm not sure people really know what branding truly means. What is the definition of branding? And then how does a company proceed to work towards that goal of where they actually do capture the essence of who they are, and then people, when they hear the name, they understand what it is that they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, the most famous brands everybody knows, but to get to that point takes so much money. It's so far in the future that for most early stage companies, not something to worry about right off the bat. It is really, though, about your values, what you're there for, what are you passionate about. And a lot of these companies, early stage technology companies of any kind, as well as early stage cause companies, there's somebody who's really passionate about that issue. And that's really, you're trying to make that into something real. For us, our motto is, we help people win, and that's what I love to do. And so that's partly why it's our motto, but it also reflects very simply, what is making this company so powerful at doing what it is. And I think that's, it evolves into a brand, but then you rebrand, and then sometimes you take your British Petroleum becomes Beyond Petroleum, and then of course it's not Beyond Petroleum currently, and then you have bad things can happen to your brand. So it's a tremendous amount of work and labor over time, but it's very interesting how much work it is, because I think at the earliest stages, a lot of the brand and the founders are really pretty much the same thing. And I think that when you're thinking about anything at the earliest stages, there's got to be that champion. Even in a big organization, if you don't have that, I don't care how much your branding sounds good, it's not going to really carry over to people. And that I think is the most important thing, is to have somebody that's that empowered and that passionate and pursuing it that hard.
Looking at the website, Antigone, Jeff and I have had this conversation. I talked about this a little bit, but this whole notion of branding and then being sure you have the right entity, you have all this together. How do you reflect that through a robust website? Or is it something that you just want to get your name, constantly have your name out there, you're kind of throwing it out? Or does that website really need to be tightly structured around the entity, around the brand, and around the delivery, whether it's a product or a service?
Well, it's interesting. They've done a lot of studies lately on how much time people spend reading something. And guess what? It's very minimal, right? This is the age of Twitter, and if you can't say it in 140 characters that people care about, nobody's going to read on, right? So it's changed our entire focus with website content. Very clean, very minimal, easy to navigate. If people can't find what they're looking for within 2 clicks, 3 at the most, they're gone. So it's really changed the way that people interact with websites, and they have to be mobile accessible. If you're a consumer-based company, it's really, really important to have a good website that, again, talks about the value of your company, helps potential customers self-select and find you, and people understand what your mission and your values are. I mean, that really helps the right people come in the door. Then you have people on the back end, perhaps, who specialize in search engine optimization, making sure that the Google search engine or Bing, find you easily when the right people are looking for you and searching for companies like yours. So I think a website is really critical. The other thing that's critical, and Jeff has already mentioned this, is customer service, right? So whether you're a product-based company or a service-based company, your customers matter. If you're selling a product and there's a problem, are you on Twitter? Are you in other locations where your customers are? And are you responding to issues when they arise?
I tell you, we just never get through all the issues that we need. I had 2 more questions for each of you, but we're not going to get it. Anyway, thank you for being here. This is Jeff Mason and Antigone Peyton. And thank you for being with us as we go over this very interesting, broad topic of green law as we look around the planet as we create the Emerald Planet.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rooftop life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water. At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site. That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff. You know what the best part is? What? More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent. Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President and Executive Director of Emerald Planet and Director and host of the Emerald Planet TV. We come to you on a weekly basis looking at what we call the best of the technologies from around the globe, and of course the people that are providing the leadership, but the creative energy and also the information and the data that's needed to make good decisions. And as we add 2 billion people to the planet and we have to take care of them, hopefully we're making good decisions now that are going to last as we move towards 2050, when almost 80% of the world's population will be living in urban areas. And so that directly relates to our conversation we have. Right beside me is Antigone G. Peyton. She is an attorney, founder, CEO of Cloudigy Law, and right on my extreme left is Geoffrey Mason, also an attorney. He's the founder and CEO of FastPatentPartner. And we're going to be talking about the steps to protection of intellectual property. And if you have a breach, and Antigone's going to define that for us, what next? And so Antigone, tell us a little bit about the why and how of having a robust scheme and protocol, if you will, as far as protecting intellectual property, but really taking care of the brand name and the very essence of the company.
Well, the why informs the how, right? So the why do we exist? Who do we want to help? What causes do we support? Once we understand that and where that's going to happen, then the how, the implementation is really the next step. And it should be customized for the company. So for instance, if you have an entity that creates new solar panels or a new coating for panels that really help in harsh environments, where do they expect their solar panels to live? Do they last 20 years? Do they last 30 years? And who do they need to reach in order to make sure this technology gets into the right hands so that they ultimately get to the location where they're needed? So all of that is a long way of saying you really have to work back to, where's the information now? How do I need to protect it? And whether it's specific data relating to the manufacturing of the technology or whether it's your company's brand, that's really going to inform the how.
Yeah, Jeff, you're very much into the mining of big data. We've talked about that before on other television programs, and also your firm really is involved in intellectual property creation. But how does your organization, FastPatentPartner, really get in and help people to know what it is that they really have, what they need to protect? And then what kind of procedures or steps do you put in place to make sure that they can actually protect what it is they have, and maybe looking to the future, how they protect what they have or what they are going to have in the future?
So most of our technologies are actually very much focused on credibility, which actually does go back to a lot of these kind of branding issues, because a lot of what we are mining for, in fact, are admissions by a major company, admissions by their experts, and certain key issues, which, at least in the kind of context that I work in most, are issues that relate to a particular litigation. But certainly, as we've all discussed, there are famous examples of brands being tarnished to these kinds of cybersecurity problems or anything else like that. So, if you're really thinking very carefully about, what was the breach, what's the impact? Does it impact the brand, or is it the trade secrets are out there and now all of a sudden we're going to have all this competition? You have to think very carefully, adversarially, how the other side on this issue is going to deal with the issue. And I think sometimes you try to create that, but in other situations you're trying to deal with the damage control. And I think we try to create the issues more often, actually.
Antigone, looking at data loss, this is something that's almost daily. We hear about it in all the media, not just the social media, but the newspapers and more of the mainstream. And it's something that really is damaging to the image of many of these companies that spend, literally tens of millions of dollars to develop their brand, and all of a sudden, with one breach, loss of 40 million credit card holders' information, or people that actually having their identity stolen from the banks and these kinds of things. How do they know when there is a breach? And then what do you have to do? What's the very next steps that you want to be doing to make sure that you start to cure or to sconce that breach?
Well, network monitoring is very important. Some companies are so sophisticated that they create what's called honeypots, places that look insecure so that people with bad intentions will go play in those places, but they're not really finding the customer data. But we're identifying their IP addresses, we're figuring out where they come from, and hopefully we're following up with the right authorities to try to shut them down. So there's very sophisticated ways that we can find these companies. Unfortunately, what we're finding is even very large Fortune 100 companies don't have adequate security measures in place. They aren't updating their virus protection. They have parts of their network that are incredibly insecure because everybody's mobile now, right? Somebody's in a coffee shop with very sensitive information on their phone. Your system is only as protected as the weakest link, right? So it's very easy to find that weak link and start getting into the system and going from there. And that can be incredibly problematic for these companies.
I think you've probably given us some clues as far as where we need to go to make sure we don't have future breaches and we be able to, protect against the losses. But let's take a very enumerated approach, 3 or 5 steps that we want to think about as top management to make sure we actually don't even have those breaches, we don't have those losses, so we're not then having to go back and recoup information or recoup and try to develop our brand all over again.
You have to figure out where your information is, how people are using it, and how they're accessing it. Once you figure that out, you need to put systems in place so that those people are protecting the information. Employee information development is very important. Training your people, how they secure information. Don't leave a laptop in the back of the car with a lot of sensitive information. It shouldn't even leave the company in the first place. So I think employee knowledge is very important, and also you can frankly tie it to their ability to move forward in the company. Are they following those policies and procedures? And do you have a checklist when people walk out the door so they don't walk out with sensitive company information? Data theft by former employees is a huge problem. It will continue to be a huge problem. Sometimes they know they're taking data that they're not supposed to. Sometimes they don't, because they just don't have this knowledge that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, in your approach to mining big data, I know that you work with a number of firms and you're trying to help them. At the same time, you're trying to provide as much information that's out there, and you're using your algorithms and all that to do it. But on the other side, the companies want to be protecting as much of this information as possible. How do you balance between this push-pull where you want to go out and grab as much information as possible, at the same time when you're advising your clients to not reveal too much, I guess, is what my question is.
Well, it's extremely hard. An in-house department has a very difficult task. I mean, they are trying to do exactly what Antigone just said they should be doing, but on the other hand, it depends on how much buy-in there is. If the CEO, the CEOs are not behind this 100%, if they're calling down to the IT department and demanding emails that should not be on the system and making a big deal out of that, that can actually mean the IT department will no longer actually follow the policy of the company. So there really is a need to get leadership behind it in a big way. And I think once you have that, then you need to really craft a smart strategy with somebody who really knows the infrastructure, really understands what's there, not necessarily just your in-house resources, but sometimes also bringing in outside counsel, because I think that is vitally important, because we've all been in the trenches in cases when these sorts of things go wrong and you're trying to shut down these backup systems and the court's got an order to you and you could lose your case that way. So it's critically important to be done proactively, and I think, but it does take high-level buy-in, otherwise it's just not going to happen.
I'm going to follow up on that, Jeff. Let's say that there's been a breach. It may be, and now more and more, it may be a foreign company or country that's actually trying to get into the data because it's something that's sensitive, or they feel it's leading edge technology, or it's leading edge processes that will help, to shorten, whatever they're trying to develop. Maybe a warship, it could be, the next solar panel, what have you. You think you know who it is, or you've identified what that organization is. What next?
Well, it's interesting. It depends on which country this is originating from, but a lot of the countries that do a lot of this kind of intellectual property theft anyway are not particularly well known for the rule of law just in general. So if you're dealing with a country like that and you know which country it is, particularly if you're a larger organization, you're going to have enough money to spend basically lobbyists in those countries, because the legal system itself will not help you, but people with political power, political might in that country, if you're able to identify who is actually doing this to you, that should be a way to bring pressure to bear. So actually very large multinational corporations are operating in countries where it's very difficult to get relief through the courts, but they're doing it because they're able to rely on those kinds of lobbying efforts because they got the money for it.
Antigone, looking at whether a company is a for-profit or non-profit, what's some of the duties they have? Let's say they do have a breach. They've lost consumer information or donor information in terms of the nonprofits. What are the requirements, or are there requirements that they have to reveal that there's been a breach? And then who should be notified in all that?
Well, for a long period of time, the requirements were unclear. But because I think of these high-profile situations, we now have a number of federal laws as well as state-specific laws that relate to data breach. What you're required to do is really driven by what was lost or what could have been lost. Is it sensitive financial information? Is it just email addresses? And where did the data loss occur? You talked earlier about European countries and the privacy directive. Privacy is a fundamental human right over there, and it's treated as such. So they have much more stringent privacy and protective laws and notification requirements, even without a data loss. When you're literally moving data from one place to another, you have to have consent, or sometimes you can't do it at all. So it really depends on where the loss occurs, what kind of information is lost, but it's really a thorny thicket for companies to try to get through, to figure out what are their duties. Now, even beyond duties, there's this social consciousness question, right? So even if you don't think you have a legal requirement to report, is it better to tell your customers and get out ahead of the PR?
That's profound. Jeff, you have a breach. You're looking to cure that. About government releases, and we only have a few seconds left to
government breach of
we need to notify. Do we need to notify governments there have been a breach? We've been talking about private entities or nonprofits. What about government bodies?
Absolutely. Certainly in the healthcare area, for example. Healthcare, there's all these information systems that have tremendously sensitive patient information. If there's been a breach of that kind of a system, there are all kinds of agencies that have to be brought in on that. You have to do lots of redactions. In fact, actually, even as a young associate, well, back in the day, I was redacting social security numbers off of certain documents that still mattered a great deal to the case. But the fact is, those government information systems, if you have that kind of sensitive information in your system and somebody walks off with it, you do need to bring the government in on that. There's no question about that.
Well, I think we've run out of time, as always. So it's always good to have you on here. And thank you, Antigone, for being back with us. Jeff, it's always good to have you on Emerald Planet TV. And thank you for being with us as we bring you such useful information. This whole notion of green law is a broad topic, is very important. Many people are interested in it. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.